Okay, our screencast today, we're going to look at childhood. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at childhood actually. Today, we're going to be focusing on whether childhood is a social construct. So, what we're going to learn is what is childhood? Um, is it the same throughout the world and has it changed over time? And any reasons or explanations that there might be for any changes or differences, obviously looking at sociological perspective. Okay, so in the Western world, especially modern Western world, we have this idea about what childhood actually is, and we believe that there's obviously a fundamental difference between childhood and adults. So children are seen as immature, both physically and psychologically. They don't know what's best for them. They don't know what's right and what's wrong, and because of that, we have to, as adults, protect them and socialize them. So teaching children what is right, what is wrong, and also protect them from the problems outside in the outside world. Jane Pilcher is a really important person when it comes to childhood, and she comes over with this idea of separateness, and that there's a clear distinction of separateness between adults and children. And these ideas of separateness and clear distinctions throughout the life stages of people come up in a number of different ways, and one of those is products and services. So the things that are geared towards children and towards adults are different. So the books, the food, the entertainment, play areas, etc., etc. All of these different services and products are geared towards specifically adults or specifically children. Happy Meals, for instance. There's laws as well. Laws are there to protect children, and there are distinctions between the types of laws that protect children from doing things and what protect what adults can do. And also the way we dress as well. There's like a line, I suppose, isn't there, that we say, oh, that's a bit dodgy. A child shouldn't really be wearing those kind of clothes or dressing in that way, and that that changes when we believe that they have got into adulthood. This is linked to this idea of like a golden age that we have as a child, where we're very happy and we're very innocent, we're protected, or we don't really understand what's happening in the world around us. But because of that, we are seen as being very vulnerable as children, and we do need protection from these dangers. And because of that, children's lives are very much within family and education, and they're protected, and they're very much within that sphere, and they're provided for, and they don't have much choice in what they can and can't do. There's an interesting question about whether or not we're children for longer now. In some respects, we definitely are. If we think back to the early 20th century, when people left school at the age of 14 or 16, girls left and they met someone and they got married very young and had children very young. Whereas boys took part in national service and joined the army and went into full-time employment very, very young as well. But nowadays we're more likely to be in our, say, mid-20s before we actually get married and have children and families, and we go on to live on our own. So the idea about being a child still living at home, being shielded from like all of these adult responsibilities and jobs, are we still a child in our 20s if we live at home and we're still in education? Some people argue that yes, we are. The other idea about, and we will cover this a lot more next week, is children, are we children for longer? If you think about the way we dress and what we're allowed to do and what we can do, etc., perhaps people are thinking that we'll become adults a lot younger. It's an interesting question, something you should think about, and we will cover next week. Okay, so looking at ideas about childhood, and there's this idea that it is socially constructed, and Stephen Wagg is someone who says, separateness isn't universal. So this idea about there's this distinct line of where you are no longer a child and you become an adult, it's not universal. And Wagg looks at this idea of being socially constructed. So it depends on where you are at what time as well. So if you are a child now compared to a child in the 17th century, then this idea about separateness is going to be different to what it is now. And also it depends on where you live. Where in the world you live, and what your society is like as well, and how they view children. That is really important. So it does go against the idea offered by Jane Pilcher. And to back that up a bit as well, we've got this idea that Wagg picks up on, that depends on where in the world and what kind of society you're in, depends on what type of difference it is to childhood. So Ruth Benedict compiled a study and argued that in simpler societies, societies where the values and norms, etc., are simpler than they are in industrialized places like modern day UK, children are treated very, very much differently. And non-industrialized societies generally, they're treated very much differently to modern Western societies in three main ways. So the responsibility that they have. Samantha Punch carried out a study in Bolivia and found that once children got around about 5 years old, they were expected to do work in the house. So you could say that their childhood's been taken away from them. Lowell Holmes conducted a similar study in Samoa and found that this idea of being too young was never an excuse. If you could pick up an object, then you can use that object. If you can walk, then you can carry stuff. So this idea of, they're too young to do it was never really used. So the responsibility of children is a lot different in different areas. Raymond Firth carried out a study looking at obedience and studied some islanders in the West Pacific and found that there was less emphasis placed on this respect and obedience of adults. So children didn't necessarily have to be obedient to adult authority. And this was a sign of them growing up, and by doing this they were regarded as an adult rather than as a child. So if you are willing to be obedient to an adult and you're still within childhood years. The final thing we'll look at is Bronislaw Malinowski, and he carried out a study again in the West Pacific Islands and looked at sexual behaviour. Now, sexual behaviour in modern Western society is very much an adult thing, and we see a lot of things in the news about sexual exploitation of children and rape, etc., etc. And what Malinowski found was that the tolerance and amusement level of adults with their attitude towards children's sexual exploitation. So they found it as being quite funny that they were exploring this sexuality, and that isn't something that we would look favourably upon in Western society. So we've looked at cultural differences. So what about historical differences? Well, Philippe Ayres, very much a leading figure in looking at this historical differences, believed that there wasn't this idea of childhood in the Middle Ages. So childhood didn't exist. Adults and children lived together as equals, so to speak. So the expectations of children were a lot higher than they were now, and they were kind of seen as like mini adults. Pollock disagrees with this and says that it's not a case that childhood didn't exist, it was just different in those times, so the notion of childhood was a little bit different. Edward Shorter, further on down the line, looked at the idea of historical differences and found that with higher death rates, in the Middle Ages, people had different ideas of what children were for. So they were seen as very much as a commodity, so they didn't necessarily treat them with the love and care that we show our infants today, and they were very much neglected, and they were seen as a way of earning money or working, not as something to have money spent on. So a lot of people, and because of the high death rates as well, a lot of people didn't even name the children. They'd refer to it as it, or they'd forget how many children they actually had, because a lot of children were dying at a very young age. So what about the reasons for these changes in position then? So we've looked at the fact that they have changed, but it's not necessarily the reasons why. Well, Ayres believes that there was an emergence of childhood from around about the 13th century onwards. So children were started being recognised as children and not as mini adults. From the 20s, well, Ayres believes that the 20th century became like a century of the child, and we started thinking about children differently, so we didn't see them as a commodity, but something that was like a central part of our family, and they were to be adored and looked after and cared for. Other things have changed as well, especially in the 19th and 20th century. So laws started changing about child labour, and excluding children from being able to do paid work, so going down the mines, etc., etc. So children stopped becoming a way of earning wages and become more of an economic liability. And what you'll find is that the birth rate started to decrease after this. Compulsory schooling, another kind of law and an act that came in 1880, where all children had to go to school, especially if you were, like a poor child, because middle and upper class people were already sending their children to school. So it's very much a working class, lower class phenomenon where they all had to go to school and get an education. Child protection and welfare legislation, such as the one that we can see on there, were put in place to try and protect children, and like social services were set up and things like that to really protect children away from harm and cruelty. Family size and infant mortality, that had a major impact. So family sizes started to lower, and lower infant mortality rates as well. So in the past, people used to have loads of babies because they feared that they would die, before the age of 2. So the more children you have, then, obviously some are going to die, but you're going to have other children because they were a financial commodity where you could actually gain economic money from them. People started placing more emotional investment in their children as well. So the fewer that you have, the more you're going to take care of them. Health as well. Health improved, obviously. Health not just for children but for everyone. But especially children's health, and also education of health as well. So knowing how to look after yourself, knowing how to take care of yourself, and knowing about foods, etc. Right, for next lesson, what I need you to do is bring these notes from the video. I will be expecting that you have expanded on these notes. Try to use Cornell method if you want. I want you to do a summary of the notes, okay? What is the main ideas? What are the main arguments? People need to start using either Cornell or other methods to ensure that we are getting these done correctly. Also, access the stats file that's going to be attached to the domestic violence video from last week, so I'll be putting that on the blog. I need you to get that statistics file and download it and print it off. Okay, bye.